Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 93. Today, our guest is Phil Manzanera. Greetings, Phil. Thank you so much for dropping by this afternoon. Your afternoon, my noon, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. So where exactly are you?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta.
Yeah,
Wow, how
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Sounds amazing. Atlanta. Yeah.
The New York of the South, I like to
Yes,
call it.
very, very cool place.
Yeah, it is kind of an oasis in the middle of the outback,
Yeah.
the southern outback of America. When was the last time you were down this way?
Well, not for a hell of a long time, actually. I'd have to Google it and find out. I go to an old sort of Roxy website or Gilmour website or something
Yeah, yeah,
and to see when the last time I was there, but not often,
yeah.
actually.
Well,
So,
we were missing out. So it's a real pleasure to catch up with you today. And,
right.
I've been a big fan of your work for decades now. So it's a real honor to get a chance to chat with you today. And
Thank you.
big fan. I'm a guitar player myself, and I'm a big
I
fan
can
of your
see.
style. Yeah, I've got.
Snap. We got snaps here.
Yeah, that's right. And you've got the legendary Firebird. I can't wait to talk about that here in a few
Yeah, that's
minutes.
cool.
And it's such a unique color. I don't think I've ever seen one in that shade.
Oh,
So, it's a pretty rare one, I would imagine. But I wanted to talk first about the new
yeah,
music that you're doing with Tim Finn.
yeah,
There's a really wonderful single that's out on YouTube now that everybody can hear. It's called "Caught by the Heart,"
yeah.
and I was kind of curious. Now, is this like the first of many songs that are coming for a forthcoming album, or is this more of a modern kind of thing where you just do them as singles and maybe eventually they'll get put
Well,
together?
what we started working about a year ago when he's. I'll go into more detail later, but basically, "Caught by the Heart" is uh, one track of four that's going to be on an EP that's coming out only digitally on the 18th of June globally everywhere, and um, and then on the 26th of August we're going to release an album called "By the Heart" again. It's called, and we had actually we've been working on 23 tracks, and we were going to because we're doing it ourselves independently and there's no big record label involved, and we can do whatever we like. And to start with, we thought, you know what, it's too many tracks. Let's just put them out as a series of EPs over a year. And then a few weeks ago, we started getting very good reaction to not only that track but the other three tracks. I have to send you the other
Love to hear
three.
them.
Yeah, very different. And we thought, hey, let's just bring out an album of 10 of the tracks sooner and scrap the idea of like whole load of EPs. Let's bring out an album in August and then we'll bring out another one in January or something like that, so we don't like oversaturate people with stuff. But Tim Finn is just like an incredible singer, lyricist, and he's like one of the most incredible people I've ever written with, And I mean, not that I've written with a lot of people. I mean, I can count them on these two fingers: Brian Ferry, Brian Eno, David Gilmour, Lucha Brieva, John Wetton, anyway, Godley and Creme, just about get to 10. But actually, out of all of those, it tends to be singers, because I'm not a singer really. I mean, I have done 3 albums with me singing my own songs and everything. But you know what? I'm never very happy with that. And when I work with a singer, I can just concentrate on music. And I always believe that the people who write the words should sing the song.
Sure.
And because it has much more resonance for them and a lot more.
Oh, absolutely.
They do it with a lot more feeling. So, working with Tim, he's in Auckland, and I'm in West Sussex in the south of England, and there's a 12-hour time difference. So if I work on something like now, I said he's asleep. I send it to him, and then I go to sleep, the next morning I wake up, he's already sent something back with words and singing on it. And
that quick.
I'm just astounded. I mean, I've never worked with any of the people I've worked with who are so prolific like that. And it's, you know, those two Finn brothers, well, you can hear it in all those great songs.
Oh yeah. Just
you know,
amazing.
they've done together and in Crowded House and as solo artists. They've got this Irish gene or something that goes back. You know, I think the mother was Irish or something. And they just got that ability to come up with tunes and words. And it's a great relief for me. I can do music. I can do the musical context for things, you know, and like I did in Roxy, create soundscapes with Eno and stuff behind Brian Ferry's voice. But, you know, nailing the top line with some great words just doesn't come easy to me.
No, well, I'm in the same boat.
So it's been a real joy to work with Tim. And I had accumulated music over maybe 3 years for what I thought was for different projects. One was for a Latin project, one was for maybe Roxy, one was, who knows, with David Gilmour, who knows. And then Tim sent me an email, you know, a year ago, and said, "Have you got any music that I could write stuff to?" So, yeah, right. I went through all my stuff. I'll send him a whole range of different things. I said, he'll never write anything on this. This is just like, no way. And he would come back every next morning. And, well, you know, well, people will hear it and decide whether they like it or not.
Yeah. Well, but now, were these like complete arranged songs that you sent him that were instrumentals that he just added the top line to, or were there times when you kind of went back and forth on the arrangement?
Yeah, yeah. I would send him an initial piece of music. He would come with an initial idea, normally a lyrical idea, and often a vocal that he wanted to keep. I would then rework some of the music. Maybe we would together change the arrangement a bit. And because we're all working remotely, you know, he's working on GarageBand. He refuses to upgrade to anything else. I luckily, you know, a few years ago, upgraded to, at least to Logic. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, there was just so much stuff that there's a friend who's an engineer, Mike Body, and I said, "Please, Mike, will you help?" And actually, funny enough, he was working with Brian Ferry at the time, and so Brian was gobbling up all his time. But then when he finished doing that, he said, "Sure, send me the stuff. I'll sort it out for you, send it back to you." And then he's been doing the mixing, you know, so all remotely. And, you know, we've got a great, on a couple of tracks, a great drummer who played with me in David Gilmour's band, Stevie DeStanislow, who plays with Cross and Nash. And he's in Orange County. Send him the stuff. He did put on drums that, you know, and then a friend in Stuttgart, again a bass player who had played on the last Gilmour album, Rattle That Lot. He put some bass on there. Some guys up in London, a guy in South America. I mean, some guys in South Africa. Tim in Auckland. I mean,
wow, so it's
because you know, because of COVID. And it's forced us to work in a different way, you know, and, you know, musicians hate to give up. They say, "No, we're going to do music, whatever, because that's what we do. We'll try whatever's necessary to try and get something going."
Sure.
And so, you know, this project has come about, as many others, I'm sure, will appear over this next year, done in the COVID way of recording.
It's like there's going to be so many albums released in the next 6 months, I think.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, that's a great thing in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry that it came out of such difficult circumstances, but
Yes.
it definitely gave us a lot of free time to create. And if we can't play live, then let's get in the studio, you know.
And let's just
let's
try
have something to show for this year off, you know.
Exactly, and let's try and help each other, you know, with you know, there's musicians in London, Brazilian musicians, and South America, who are really stuck. There's not a lot of session work and stuff. So it provided, I was able to pay them to do sessions. And if they didn't have the equipment and stuff, I said, you've got to get the equipment. I can't have you not working. You're going to have to learn how to do it yourself. So everybody self-recorded. I'm amazed how good, because most musicians have got ears, so they can hear when something's distorted or not distorted, or there's a good take or not. So they're sort of taking responsibility for themselves a lot more. It's just not just hanging out, let's let the producer do it.
A lot more discerning at this stage,
yes,
and it's great. It makes for
absolutely. In these difficult times, and everybody has different circumstances, we do what we can.
Sure. Well, I've been really impressed with what I've heard from the single. It was really beautiful, and your guitar tones on it. You're a master of such unique tones, and a lot of times they're ones where it almost makes you wonder: is that a guitar? Is that a synthesizer? I like it when the guitar doesn't sound like a guitar, and I think you're a master of that at times.
Well, actually, funny enough, the beginning of that Caught by the Heart track is me using this pen on the Firebird, up at the top and making those sort of bird-like sounds.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about those.
Anything lying around, obviously.
Sure.
I couldn't find a bottleneck anyway to do it properly.
Sure,
so what have I got that's metal? Here we go. A fountain pen.
I've been known to use a Bic lighter, which is a pretty cheap way to go, but it works in a pinch occasionally.
Yes.
And I love the tremoloed guitar at the beginning. That's such a delicious sound. Was it? Now, I wanted to ask, early on, what was your palette? What did you have to work with when it came to the sort of atmospheric guitar tones? Like, what was the first effect you started using back in the 70s? And what did you acquire along the way through the 70s to expand your palette?
Well, really, next year will be the 50 years that I've been a professional musician, and 50 years Roxy anniversary. And, when we started, there was very few things.
Maybe like a wah-wah and reverb in the amp, and
a Fender amp with reverb. But what we did early on is, and it was lucky being with Eno.
Sure.
Because he was ahead of me, definitely. Funny enough, he was like buying and selling equipment, actually, when I first met him and joining Roxy. And so we bought these Revox tape recorders.
Mm-hmm.
And what you could have special adjustments made to them. One was called Cell Sync, and the other was just using it as an echo unit, but then putting bits of sticky tape on the capstan to make this flutter effect. So everything was very organic. You had to try and make stuff yourself, and but basically there was a great pedal board maker called Pete Cornish.
Sure.
And I had a Pete Cornish board. I've still got it. That was made out of wood, and it's real British what we call Heath Robinson type of thing. Nothing, flash. And I had a fuzz face. I said, "Can you stick that inside it?" Actually, no. He did make his own Pete Cornish fuzz, and had an input and output that went to the Revox tape recorder, and I had a wah-wah pedal. That was it. So, you just had to, but, the other thing actually I remember it had was, we modified a de-arm and volume pedal that controlled the speed of the tape recorder. So you could speed it up or slow it down.
Sure.
So between having that equipment and also using Eno as VCS3 synthesizer to treat my guitar as well as my original signal. So he could take my signal, stick it through his VCS3 oscillators or whatever he had, stick it through the Revox tape recorder. It sounds very convoluted, but you know, this enabled us to have some pretty unique guitar sounds.
Absolutely.
To start with, you know.
Now, what would be a track you'd point someone to give them a real good example of that setup?
Well, there's a Roxy track called Ladytron.
Sure, yeah.
And if you listen to the end of it, you'll hear exactly what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah.
I'm playing like a crazy mad solo, and he's treating it. And actually on, I think we brought out a special edition of the first album, and it was remixed in 5.1, I think it's just 5.1, by a guy called Stephen Wilson.
Sure, I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, Stephen Wilson, who's an incredible artist in his own right.
Yes,
but I went to his house, and what he did, which was great, was that on the actual album, it's faded out, you know, really quickly, but it actually went on for ages. But because of vinyl in those days, you had to have things that are shorter because you didn't want to have more than 20 minutes on each side of a piece of vinyl, otherwise the needle would jump up. So on this new version, you get the whole, you know, really long treated version. And that's what we used to do live on stage. Just go to this crazy mad world of sound, which
and Eno would be adjusting it live on the fly,
yeah,
just like he did in the studio, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so we would both, you know, I'd be speeding up and slowing down what I was playing. It would, that input would go into him, who would then be treating it, retreating it, and it was a real fiesta of sound. If you
well, that's a good way to put it. I love that. And you know, that approach, I think, can you think of anybody else that was doing that back then? I really think you guys were the first. You know, that whole textural school really became popular once the digital delay came out and Andy Summers used it and all that, you know. You always kind of hear him mentioned first, but you guys were way ahead of the curve, you know.
Well, you know, I mean, I grew up listening to, in the 60s, the middle 60s, you know, when I was 16, 17, the first Pink Floyd appeared, you know, Sid Barrett and all that, and Soft Machine and Velvet Underground, and just a great, you know, John Cale's influence on it, and just Systems Museum, and just a bit of abstract kind of contextual sound. So, you know, we wanted to get into that world with whatever we had around us, you know, and you just had to improvise, because they only invented all these sort of Japanese type keyboards with sounds on them, you know, in the middle 70s onwards.
Sure. Were you kind of hearing these sounds in your head before you realized them?
No, not at all. It was all totally spontaneous around. Mm-hmm. But it was the idea behind it. Let's try and come up with something interesting. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of British musicians were influenced by the Beatles and George Martin and his approach to recording and the sounds and the very interesting sounds like on Tomorrow Never Knows, and their use of tape loops and stuff like that, which we all, you know, were interested in. And there was a great electronic BBC workshop called the BBC Workshop, which created great synthesizer type sounds in early, for programs really. And there's a fantastic woman called Delia Derbyshire who was very experimental. In fact, there's just been a documentary about her here on the BBC. She influenced a hell of a lot of musicians, you know, including Pink Floyd and any people who are into electronic rock, or adding that to psychedelia and stuff like that. I guess it all came out of psychedelia, wanting to
and
freeform, expand, you know, sounds and light. And
it's like the gate was open to experimentation, and that was, you know, let's see how far we can push this. Let's find sounds nobody's ever heard before.
Yeah, and there was a parallel there with freeform jazz and what's happening in jazz as well, you know, and it was experimental and let's put these things together and see what happens. You know, no one knows, but it was the idea of wanting to experiment
Sure.
and to try something different.
So many amazing things came out of it, and Roxy in general. You know, you guys were just like 10 years ahead of the curve in a way. You know, it's like I think people must have been really taken aback when they first heard and saw you. You know, almost like you guys just got off a UFO or something. You know.
Well, I always used to say that Eno looked like he came from the planet Zog or something, you know, because
I can
he
see
was like
that.
an alien. It's
Yeah,
like, wow, where's this
alien
guy?
in feathers.
Yeah. And, you know, I remember our first US tour where we were supporting all sorts of crazy,
Like who?
well, Marlowe, Jojo Gunn, 10 Years After, Jethro Tull, I don't think Humble Pie. Well, we did play with Humble Pie. But I mean, Marlowe in Fresno, you know, Carlos Santana's brother, they threw stuff at us, you know, water bombs.
Oh.
They looked at us and said, "What, you guys are taking the piss."
Right.
You know, but we just stood there, no, we're going to play our stuff. It's weird and wonderful. But we did attract, you know, just all the freaks in every town. Anybody who was a freak or way out on a limb, where there's, you know.
And it really wasn't like the hippie crowd so much either, was it? Sort of like a different kind of crowd.
A different kind of new crowd, a sort of outcast crowd, but sort of into weird and wacky things. And but obviously, you know, we wanted to, you know, make some impact. I mean, obviously, we didn't make much of an impact.
Absolutely. Although, in some ways, I mean, when I hear you and see the early footage, I just think, you know, this is pointing right to the 80s. Like, listen, folks, this is where the world's heading, and we're leading the charge. You know? So.
Well, luckily, you know, we had Bowie, you know, who helped us to start with, you know, and made us his support act and really championed us.
That would be a great double bill. So did it finally feel like you got on a bill that made sense after all those other bands?
Totally. I mean, the first time we played with Bowie was in it's a pub. It's like a bar here in Croydon, South London, and it was called the Greyhound, Croydon. And I remember going to the sound check, and we're talking about a tiny place. And I turned up early, and with Roxy, we used to change into our stage costumes like actors and things. You know.
Sure, right.
I walked in to this empty wooden floor and a tiny stage, and there sat on little chairs to the left was David, you know, Woody, Trevor, Mick, all dressed up in their Ziggy Stardust outfits. And I just went, wow, you know.
Right.
Hi, my name's Phil. And I thought, oh, right, they're wearing this stuff all the time. Wow, that's pretty far up. I don't think so. I think, but you know, so we're the support act. And he used to say to me when we met, because we often bumped into each other over the years, that Phil, if I had £1 for every person who said they were at the Greyhound Croydon at that gig, I would be like a millionaire. I said, well, actually, you probably are a millionaire. But I know what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, there was probably about 30 people there, but so many people said they came to that gig. And then he kind of invited us to support him at a bigger theatre called the Rainbow Theatre. Mm-hmm. So we played with him twice as support. And then I never played with him again until his very last appearance in the UK, which was at the Royal Albert Hall, when he came on to guest on the David Gilmour tour.
He sang Arnold Lane and Comfortably Numb.
Sang Arnold Lane. It was one of the highlights, thrills of my whole life. I mean, when he came out, the audience had no idea he was going to come out. He came out, and actually it's on YouTube, you can see it. I mean, the reaction was unbelievable. And he just said, look, I hope I can justify this reaction.
Well, he hadn't performed in public in a while at that point,
No,
had he? So it
no,
was totally unexpected.
totally unexpected. And
I have to say, he really made Comfortably Numb his own. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
I've heard other people cover it, and it just
No.
sounds like a Roger Waters impersonation. But
Yeah, yeah,
Bowie,
yeah.
no, Bowie
No.
just,
Bowie, inhabited the part when he took on something.
yeah.
He
That was,
worked great. Yeah, no.
when did you first meet David? I'm guessing back in the late 60s or early
Gilmour.
70s. Gilmour, yeah.
Well, yeah, I met him. I was 16, just about to turn 17. And I was brought up in South America. And then eventually I begged my parents to send me to England, pop rock music.
Sure.
And
Now, how old were you when you got to England?
I was 9.
9. Okay.
And the beginning of the 60s, 1960.
Okay. Well, that's
September 1960. I arrived, age 9, in South London at what they call a boarding school, where you sleep. And my brother was 8 years older than me. He was already there. So, it wasn't, I was just like on my own. And anyway, by the time I get to 15, my father died in South America, in Caracas, Venezuela. My mother, who was Colombian, came back to live in London. And I said to my mother, by that time, I was totally obsessed by rock and roll and pop music. And I said, yeah, I'll stay on and do my exams and all that. But really, I want to be a rock and roll musician. And she had no idea what that was. She
for sure.
could hardly speak English. Like, rock and roll? What's that? ¿Qué es eso? No, esto no sé.
Does that pay well? Probably not.
No. I said, whoa. My brother, who was very cool, said, look, I know this guy who's just become a professional musician. Why don't we go and have lunch with him, asking what you have to do to become a professional musician? So we went to Earl's Court, a place in London, and that guy was David Gilmour. So my brother met him at Cambridge, up in Cambridge, and after our lunch, we went back with him because he had to collect his Strat, and got a taxi to Abbey Road to start, recording Saucerful of Secrets, which was the first Floyd album that he played on, which Sid's on as well.
Second album in general.
Yeah. So, he says, he can't remember what he said, but it must have been something good, because 5 years later, I managed to get into Roxy music. But
so that quick. So how old were you when you got in Roxy? Like 16 or 16?
No. 5 years later.
Oh, 5 later. Okay. So you didn't meet him when you were 9. You met him a few years down the road.
Yeah, no, I met David when I was 16, turning 17.
Okay.
And then by complete coincidence, when we were doing the second Roxy music album called For Your Pleasure, we were recording it at George Martin's studio, Air Studios, which at that time was in Oxford Circus. And we were in Studio 1 waiting for this producer to finish what he was doing to come to start producing our album. And the producer was in Studio 2, and he was mixing Dark Side of the Moon. And it was Chris Thomas. So it's just there. I just popped in, and I was amazed, with the track Money and David's guitar. So I sent David a telegram saying, remember me? I'm in a band now. It's called Roxy Music, And then since then we have stayed in touch, so that's 1973.
Wow. Okay. And then all those years later, you wound up in his group, but you were close friends before that. I mean, you collaborated. I remember you collaborated on a song on this particular record.
That's the one.
We slipping down the hole we fall. Yeah, I love that.
Slip.
That's kind of like the peppiest song on that record in a way.
It's we did our best, and he actually, by complete quirk of fate, I live next door to him now.
Okay.
So and 10 minutes away Brian Ferry lives. So it's weird,
Yeah.
but how life is, fate, you know, things
Tell me a
happen.
bit about you collaborating on that song. What did you bring to it, and what did he bring?
Well, you know, like most of the people who are singers and lyrics, funny enough, actually he wrote the lyrics on that. I had like a musical backing track with, actually funny enough, I have got my original demo still. And the part that's on there's a part that's on, they put on a sequencer, was actually played on the guitar. So I actually have, I had a rhythm guitar and that echo type guitar.
Like a kind of digital delay, kind of bounce back thing.
Yeah, type of thing. Yeah. And I had those chords, and you know, it appealed. We worked on a couple of tracks, and he chose that one, and then he took it, and Bob Ezrin was mixing and stuff. And then the next time I heard it all was when it was pretty much finished. I went along to the boat studio and heard it. I was like, wow, yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite tracks, and I love the work that Tony Levin does on the Chapman
Yeah.
That breakdown in the middle is so tasteful.
Yeah.
And I always thought the beginning was kind of a takeoff on time, you know, that similar kind of ticking clocks, and then all the alarms go off at once, but like a modern version of it.
Yeah, well, actually, that's at the beginning of Flying, isn't it? The first track. I don't think is that the beginning of?
I think it's the beginning of One Slip.
Oh, I'll have to.
Then you hear the big giant drums come in, and
oh yeah, that's true.
Kinda, yeah, and then the kind of marimba sounding thing in there next.
Yeah, because that's right. That marimba sounding thing was played on the guitar originally.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll have to somehow put that up.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that
demo at some point.
Have you heard? You know, they went in and kind of remixed that for a recent box set, and like stripped away a lot of the 80s production values, and even like went in on some tracks and placed Hammond tracks from Rick playing live on that tour. They managed to slip some of those parts into this remix of the album. And I don't know if it's necessarily better, because I think the 80s production was just part of the deal, you know, it's of its time, and I like it. But it was interesting to hear it stripped away and remixed, because you definitely heard some things in the mix that you never noticed before. So it was interesting from that angle. I don't think it replaces the original in my mind, but it was interesting.
No. Well, yeah, I mean, that they do a lot of work on the catalog.
Yeah.
So it's continually being refreshed.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's, you know, they're finding fresh ways to package it up, and people love it. You know, Pink Floyd's one of the most revered classic rock bands ever. So, you know,
yeah, absolutely.
Always new generations discovering them, and it's that kind of music that's just timeless, where every generation finds something to love. So
yeah,
that's awesome. So I wanted to talk a bit about your guitars. The white Stratocaster that with the star inlays. Do you still have that one?
I don't, funny enough. And you know, the story about a lot of my guitars is I see pictures of them on the internet and I think, where did that guitar go?
Right.
Why haven't I got that? You know, I do remember once going to a gig in somewhere in the west of England, somewhere like Plymouth. We had two very inexperienced road crew, two guys just out of university in Manchester or something. And I remember coming out of the gig, and they had the transit van with the doors open at the back. And they were going in, getting the equipment, both of them, coming out and putting them in the back, and then going back. And then they would close the doors and drive to wherever you were living and give you your guitars and things. And when they got to me, you know, I said, yeah, that's great. Here's the Strat. Yeah, but where's the 335? They went, oh no. So basically someone just went in and helped themselves to the guitar. So between that, and you know, I had a studio out in the country at one point, and I had lots of bands and people coming backwards and forwards. Half my guitars disappeared. I mean, you know, but luckily I still have my friend there. And I also have a very nice Telecaster over there, which is a 51 Telecaster.
Wow.
So, but those two guitars have been on all the Roxy albums, you know, like More Than This on that one there, you know, and the red one on Anything Beefy, and they just record beautifully, you know. There's
so you had the Firebird pretty much from the beginning of Roxy. It's even on the first record.
It's not on the first record. I had the white Strat.
It's all Strat. You bought that Strat when you got in Roxy, right? That was kind of like,
it was the deal. I had a 335, but they said, hey,
it's a little old school, little
old school jazzy. I was in a prog little band for about a year before. And, you know, like something a bit more classic rock and roll, because, you know, that it was a weird band, but some of us had to be a little bit more like one foot in the other camp, a bit rock. Me and the drummer had, you know, Paul was into John Bonham, you know, and I had to give it a bit of, you know, welly with high watts and things like that.
Who were your guitar inspirations early on?
Well, all the classic people, you know, starting with George Harrison, but you know, Hendrix, you know, I saw his first appearance on the TV here, and it just, like, I was just floored. I just ran to the screen and playing Hey Joe, and I was just like, what is that? It's so exciting. And obviously Clapton, all the guitarists who were in the John Mayall, passed through John Mayall and the Yardbirds, Beck,
sure,
Jimmy Page, you know. But you know, I also loved you know, the Velvet Underground. So I love the anarchic stuff there. I love Spirit. I love Randy California.
Oh, got a line on you, those guys.
Yeah. Oh my God. I did do a tour with him once, actually, before he died, poor chap. He's a great guy. And the West Coast, you know, Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead. I mean, Zappa. You know, there's just so many. You know, we saw all the first performances of all those bands in London in 67 and 68, and we were just so excited by it. And yeah, that has big influence on you. Sure. And you know, so a whole range of guitarists, you know, and it, you know, the early John McLaughlin, I used to love his first solo album, actually. Beautiful sound. And then when he joined Miles Davis for In a Silent Way, just the economy of his playing and the beautiful tone. So I picked up bits and pieces from so many people, and we all were like very much into hearing all the Kings.
Sure.
You know, the three
what
Kings.
Did you think of Mahavishnu and that more fusiony stuff that came a few years later?
I was initially I was very impressed because of all the technical aspect, but then it left me a little bit cold.
Yeah,
I actually preferred, you know, the period of jazz, which is Miles, where he's feels the Kilimanjaro in a silent way and going back.
Sure,
to Spain. To me, that was my favorite period of Charlie Mingus, and who I saw play at Ronnie Scott's, incredible guy. So I like space, you know, and I like the space and the discipline of piano, bass, and drums and the trumpet, something, you know, and just incredible what could be done with that. You know, but when everyone's sort of tooled up, if you like, with all electric stuff, it was, yeah, it was different. I mean, it was even Miles. You know, I prefer the earlier stuff to the Bitches Brew and stuff, which is, you know, I loved Weather Report though, which is, you know, but that was more spacey. It's very
definitely, yeah, especially early on.
Yeah. So, you know, I love Crosby, Stills, Nash, Neil Young, and Stephen Stills' crazy guitar kind of player, and Neil
Oh, I
Young's
love his
crazy
guitar
kind
playing.
of
Yeah.
guitar playing. Just that's me, you know. It's like mad, but it's like, you know.
It's so soulful, and
Yeah.
I think he gets overlooked sometimes because everybody thinks about their vocals, which are so amazing. But it's like, you know, he plays all of the electric guitar on those records, and he
Oh
has
yeah.
a really unique style. Really like it.
Yeah, really great.
Yeah. Um, so the white Strat, did it come
Yeah.
with the star inlays already? That's
Okay. Let me confess that white Strat. I'll tell you what. One day, Eno turned up at rehearsals and said, "My milkman," because in those days the milkmen used to deliver bottles of milk out
Sure.
to everybody's houses. On the milk float said, "Yeah, do you want to buy a guitar?" And he produced this guitar, and on the back, I swear it said JH Experience. So Eno said, "I got this guitar. It's probably ripped off from something. I've got this guitar. Do you want to buy it from me?" You money grabbing. No. Sure, I want to buy it off you. It was like £60 or something. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I had an ex-Jimi Hendrix guitar. Who knows?
and
But
it wasn't even set on fire. That's
yeah,
good.
well, yeah, it wasn't brown from the burn mark.
Right.
No, I just stuck some silver decals on it.
Oh, okay, that's okay. Well, yeah,
I mean, it would have been cool if I'd had them specially made.
yeah.
That didn't happen in the early
Not in
70s.
those days. No,
You
no.
know, the guitars, you know, that guitar cost me £110, which is like $200 or something. You know, everything was a lot cheaper and smaller, and there was fewer people and fewer instrument shops, and there was no Japanese stuff, and there was no stuff made anywhere else. You know, and there was some stuff from Germany which was cheaper. You know, like Selma stuff and Framus and.
Well, am I right that there was even a time when it was hard to even get something like a Stratocaster in England?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, famously, the first Stratocaster in England was bought by Cliff Richard for the Shadow. Well, for him, but he gave it to Hank.
Right. And suddenly every young guy in England wanted a red Stratocaster.
Well, yeah, no one could afford them. And it was because of Buddy Holly that they got them. Mm-hmm. And famously, they sent off to buy this stuff from America because there was an embargo. Right. Actually, after the war and stuff, you weren't allowed to buy instruments from America. That's why, you know, a lot of the German Hofner and people like that, you know, that's why the Beatles had all that stuff in Gretsch. I don't know how they got it, but they were in Liverpool, sort of boats coming in from America. But yeah, there was this trade embargo. You couldn't, and once that was lifted, I think it could have been in the early 60s. That's when you could then buy a Gibson or a Fender, more to the point, Strat or a Telecaster. And
so tell me how you came to find the Firebird, and what was its initial appeal for you? Just such an unusual look, or what?
Well, okay, when I was 10 or 11, there was a famous guitar shop in a place called Surbiton, England, and had a catalogue, you know, and I still have my school, when I was at school, books where I used to cut out pictures of the guitars, stick them. And one of them was a Hofner Galaxy. It was red, 3 pickup. I've still got it. It's absolutely amazing. So I have previous with red guitars, you know. Mm-hmm. So we finished the first Roxy album, and then I was looking around, you know, to my 335 had been stolen. I was looking around for something else, and there was a music newspaper called Melody Maker in England in those days. And in the back, they had ads, and they had equipment for sale, and it said, Gibson guitar for sale, ring this number. So I rang this number, and it was an American guy, young guy who was 15 or 16 who came with his parents, and they were living in a very rich part of London called Regent's Park. So I went along there, knocked on the door opened, he held up that. I went, yes, thank you. £110, which was a lot of money in those days. Thank you very much, and walked away, you know, with that. And I thought, this is the perfect Roxy guitar.
Yeah.
It's flashy, you know, it's designed like the back of a Chevy, 50s Chevy. And it was designed by Ray Dietrich, who used to design cars in Detroit, you know, for, you know, Dig the Fins, you know, cars.
Yeah, like it's almost like the back fin on an old Chevy. Yeah, because and he was tasked with the job of like competing with Fender. So this is what he came up. This was his answer to Fender. But of course, it's quite heavy, and it doesn't have, you know, the maneuverability of a Strat or a Telecaster. But he did create something unique, and you know, the majority of them are in brown. But you could, from the factory, and this is what this guy's parents did, you could get a custom color version of the brown one, and all the colors were the car colors, because you can see the color chart. It's online, and you could just kind of pick it from a menu. And
yeah, so that is like Thunderbird red or something, you know, from a Corvette or something like that.
Now, had you seen anybody else playing a Firebird before that, or was it the first time you laid eyes on one?
Well, actually, funny enough, Brian Jones used one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And actually, early, I'm not sure whether Keith also had one early on. They were brown. Mm-hmm. But no, obviously, I hadn't ever seen a red one. Mm. And I thought it was the only one in the whole world. I did see one come up for sale in Canada, red. Now, whether just a few years ago, now whether that was resprayed to copy that, or whether that was actually done from the factory, I'm not sure. But I just assumed I had the only one in the world, obviously. But the great thing is that it sounds great. I mean, on that track, Caught by the Heart, that's all it is. It's that guitar playing the thing, and then playing the lead bit through the end, and it's all just going through one little amp, which is a Fender, small little Fender amp, which is over there, which Mr. Gilmour kindly gave me for my 60th birthday.
Very nice.
Beautiful thing, and through this Universal Audio aux, and it creates the most wonderful. And I have just one mic, a Neumann. Actually, I have a 57 Shure, cheap mic on it. That's it. And I've sort of come back full circle to what I was doing, and me and Eno were doing in our little front rooms at home, not being in a big, flash, expensive studio, just working on stuff at home, you know. And I'm delighted that I've sort of regressed.
Well, you know, you can get a lot of variety out of a handful of things, you know, and that's the one.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have all sorts of amazing pedals here, but I just can't be asked to use them. I mean, I've got this great thing here, Tube Driver, which Mr. Gilmour suggested I get, which is handmade in America. It's absolutely fabulous. But, you know, I can get the sound with just this thing. And it's a different kind of, you know, and then I can treat it later in Logic and stuff like that.
Did you have a more modern pedal board when you play with Gilmour and more recent Roxy gigs?
With David, actually, funny enough, they were Pete Cornish, but new versions of Pete Cornish. But when I played with him, I used his old one.
Okay.
And because one of my jobs when playing with David was to really recreate some of his guitar parts with, you know, as authentically as possible.
Sure.
So, that was part of my challenge. So I did use various of his guitars, and, for Wish You Were Here or Comfort Me On, I used the actual 12 string that he recorded, and the 12 string part, and the actual Ovation thing that he did on
What were some of your favorite old Floyd songs to play with him?
Well, lots.
Yeah.
All those great tracks from Dark Side of the Moon.
I thought it was wonderful that you all tackled Echoes, because that's such a...
Echoes, especially when dear old Rick was alive.
Yeah.
That was to see the development on Echoes, because I mixed, I produced the live album, and I had to go through, for the extras, I had to go through all the concerts to pick the right version of Echoes. And the very best version, where Rick just came to life, and it was a joy to watch the interplay between him and David, was at the very last gig, live in Gdansk, on that album. And it lasts something like 20 minutes. It just went on. And Rick was on fire. And unfortunately, the year after that, he got cancer, and then he died, but Echoes, what fun that was to play that.
Yeah, that's just an epic tune, and
epic tune.
Great guitar parts, and
they both sing on it. You see, that's the great thing. Rick
I love the blend of their voices.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful. It was much different when Roger sang. I don't think he really blended with anybody in particular. No. But Rick and Dave, it was just beautiful. And it's nice that Dave retired it, because I can't imagine performing it without Rick anyway. That really wouldn't be right. So, yeah.
No, that's right. I don't. That's right. That's why I don't think he will ever play it again.
No, I don't think so. But it was nice to see it happen.
Yeah.
Because that's a rare one that hadn't been touched probably. Well, I think they played it a couple times in the 80s, but
that tour that we did was magic in the US,
Yeah, the two DVDs.
On an Island tour.
Yeah, there's a couple DVDs, there's the Royal Albert Hall, and then there's the one you mentioned. Between the two of those, there's just some wonderful mementos of that tour. And it was a great album. And you had a big hand in writing a lot of that music on an Island. Am I right?
Well, not writing it, but I produced. I did a little bit. And, I did, my kind of production is not like twiddling knobs on the desk. It's all like more like standing back and saying conceptually, what are we doing here? Is that right? Is the texture right there? And how can we improve that? Or let me mess around with some stuff and see if you like it, chop things up and put them back. And, I try and be helpful, basically. David doesn't need it. He could produce it all himself, but it's just a big job. And it's better to have somebody as a sounding board. And when we did that album, he hadn't done an album for 10 years. So it's like, wanting him to get match fit, which he did. And then, just soared away on the tour, and then having Rick was a bonus. And then we did some gigs where Crosby and Nash came and sang as well, which was just like wonderful. Actually, I just heard a track, Crosby track, a new track today with Malcolm McDonald. So really great.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look that up.
Check that out.
I heard a recent one from him about a year ago, and it sounded like Steely Dan, which was kind of, kind of a different direction for him, but a wonderful sound.
Yeah,
definitely. So I wanted to ask a bit about some of your collaborations. I'm a big fan of Godley and Creme, and I was wondering, I know you go back quite a ways with them. I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about, your thoughts on 10cc back in the day when you first heard them, and how you got to know Lol and Kevin?
Well, I love 10cc. I mean,
Oh,
who
I do
doesn't
too.
like I'm Not in Love? I mean, plus the first album, right from the beginning, loved them. And then through mutual friends, I think 1973, 74, met Kevin Godley first. And then gradually became friends with all of them. And, you know, eventually, strangely, I bought a house next door to Kevin.
Oh, okay.
And Kevin Godley had bought that house from Keith Moon.
I remember he was on my show a few months ago and he told me about it. He said he didn't find a car in the swimming pool, luckily, but
No, but what?
there were remnants of Keith Moon around the house and on the grounds.
That's right. And in fact, Keith, at the end of the driveway, there was a pub, you know, and Keith didn't have a driving license, and he used to drive this lawnmower, sit on lawnmower from his house up the drive to the pub. And then, one day he drove into there's a little pond.
Oh, okay. So,
But that lawnmower, Kevin gave me the lawnmower. So for years I had that lawnmower.
Keith Moon's lawnmower.
But Keith Moon, he just left the house. And I don't know if Kevin mentioned, but he left it with all the clothes, everything. He just left. Everything was there. When they turned up, Kevin and his wife Sue, you know, it was like, what? Crazy. Anyway, so they lived next door, became very good friends, and then good friends with all of them, you know, and we went on holiday together. In fact, you know, they got into making a lot of films and videos.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I think they wanted to be filmmakers from the very beginning.
They're very arty, incredibly talented.
Well, even the 10cc songs often seem like little vignettes, you know.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's such good
songwriters. Some of the best lyrics in rock and roll.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Storytellers. Yeah.
Man, I love it. So I was wondering how you came to play on this album, Freeze Frame.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that particular one. Okay, we were next door neighbors. Roxy had stopped working together after the Out Siren album. Brian went to live in LA, and we weren't sure whether Roxy were going to get back together again. You know, we're good at 5-year periods, and then we all get sick of each other and say goodbye.
Need some space, you know,
for the rest of your life. No, only joking, because we're still all sort of together. And so Kevin said, look, why don't me, Lowell, and you form a band? I said, sure, let's do it. So they spoke to the manager, got a deal with Polydor. Off we went to record in a studio near Lowell's house called Surrey Sound, which was cheap. Although eventually the Police did their first album there, and Squeeze and all sorts of. And anyway, we were busily recording away and all that. And then Brian came back from America and said, oh, can we get the band back together? I said, well, I've just joined this other band with Godley and Creme. It's, you know, very imaginatively called GCM. And we got a deal. He said, oh, well, don't worry about it. You could do both at the same time. And then proceeded to book some time in New York, Atlantic Studios, thus rendering it impossible for me to be in Godley, Creme and Manzanera. And the album that we were working on was that one, Freeze Frame.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed, but the first track is called An Englishman in New York.
Sure.
And that's me.
Oh, that explains it.
In their very witty way. They said, we've written this song. Yeah, it's called An Englishman in New York. You obviously can't be in both things at the same time. So anyway, a few of the tracks that I did with them are on there. And one track in particular was typical of them. And I think it was Lowell actually said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll each go into the studio for 6 hours on our own. And you can each have 8 tracks. You mustn't listen to what the other person has done. And you just play whatever you want to play. And then we'll all come in at the end and we'll put all the faders up.
Well,
and we'll see.
if they at least say we're going to play in A minor, or give you.
I honestly can't remember. I hope so.
I would think you'd need that at least. But
the track that's on there, that no, I can't remember the titles, but that track is there.
Well, let me see here. Was it?
Is it called Random Brainwave?
Yeah, that's the second track on there.
I think that's it.
Okay. Did you play on I Pity Inanimate Objects?
I honestly can't remember.
Okay.
But I mean, they were, they'd grown up together, been at art school. They had a bond. In NCC, there was Kevin Lowell and there was Graham and Eric. There were 2 different songwriting styles and people. And Kevin Lowell worked together so often that they were just intuitive the way they worked. I was in the room when they were writing stuff for their album they called Consequences. And it was a joy to see how they, it's real proper songwriting,
I'm one of the few that bought it.
I went along to some of the recordings. It was mad. It was mad. But they, like not songwriters do this, proper songwriting. This piano and they sing a melody and a word comes to them and they gradually craft the song. Those guys could do that. I can't do that. And none of us in Roxy could do that at all. We had to approach songwriting from a completely different way because we just couldn't do that kind of thing, proper songwriting. So the Kevin Lowell were just amazing, and the only person who's a proper songwriter is Tim Finn, I think.
Yeah, I can see
that I've worked with. He's wonderful.
Have you heard Kevin's most recent album called Muscle Memory?
I haven't.
It's worth checking out. It's one.
I'd like to actually.
He went on the internet and said, "Send me pieces of music." Right. Anybody could do it, and he received like 250 pieces. Wow. Sifted through them, found 13 he really liked, and then wrote lyrics to them.
Wow.
And he has such a great voice. I think he was the best singer out of the 4 of them in 10cc, and they were all great singers, but Kevin just had such an
He has a very unique voice, doesn't that high thing where it's Kevin singing straight away. And that's not easy for singers to be distinctive.
Yeah. And he still has it, he said just the fact that he hadn't been out there using it so much kind of preserved it, so I think you'd enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the problems with people who are so talented in different areas is that they spread their talent amongst these different areas. And so brilliant at doing films and editing and art, and he can draw brilliantly.
Great.
He played the drums incredibly, and good at too many things. I can only just do one thing. So I do. That's me. That's all I do.
I know the feeling. Yeah, definitely. Couple more questions. Your famous glasses, where did they come from, and do you still have them?
Well, I'll tell you where they are. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, I think that's where they belong.
They do sort of belong there, but I wish I had them back, actually, because I thought I had loaned them for a couple of years. What I should do is get a copy made somehow and try and swap them over without anyone realizing, because they are unique. I didn't make them. The wonderful clothes fashion designer called Anthony Price, who worked on a lot of the Roxy albums, and the girl, her outfit on the front and on the second album, and, some of Brian's clothes as well. I went to the photo shoot for the first album, and I come from a very different background. I'm from South America, Latin music, and dance, cumbia, all sort of stuff. And I came to London, loved all the electronic stuff, and I joined Roxy. Those guys had gone to art school. They were studied fine art. They had friends who were fashion designers, photographers. I was like a country country boy type thing. So I turn up to the photo session with some like terrible outfit, quite frankly. And the fashion designer guy, Anthony, said, "Oh, darling, what is that? That is a nightmare. Take that off, put these glasses on, put this leather jacket on, you're done." And, you know, the guy, it became like my wonderful, unique sort of USP thing. And they are brilliant. And it's like bug-eye glasses.
Yeah, I was to say, it's kind of like a fly's eyes looking through them.
Yeah. But basically, it's Diamante material stuck onto, you know, a pair of, but, you know, that's the magic of theatre or film or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's such a classic look with you, with the long hair and the beard and the what almost looks like a burgundy tracksuit. Is that right?
No, well, that was after, but that's not. Yeah,
It's a little
first album cover is the leather jacket, and then after the next cover is the armadillo, which is like blue, which I still have, but I just about get my hand in. I must have been thin as a stick then.
Weren't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. When did you meet young Simon Phillips? You know, the 801 album is so amazing. It's one of my favorite live albums. And, you know, he's a big part of why it's so magical.
Oh, absolutely. Simon was 18. We had this, me and Eno sat down with a friend who was a journalist actually called Ian McDonald. And we devised a project which would put technical people against people who are anti-technique. So we said, right, who is the best drummer or someone we can get? And someone said, this guy called Simon Phillips, he's only 18, but he's absolutely brilliant. So I rang Simon and said, do you want to, this is a crazy project. It's only going to last 6 weeks. We're going to do 3 gigs. We're going to record one of them and then it's finished. Do you want to do it? And it's with Eno, me, Francis Monkman, who was in a band called Curved Air, who had been to the Royal College of blah, blah. And Bill McCormick, who was my friend from my band before and had played with Robert Wyatt. And a blues player called Lloyd Watson, who had just won the Melody Maker Blues Artist of the Year on his own with a slide guitar. Wonderful man. And he said, right, we're going to have, in this corner, we're going to have the technical people. And over here, we're going to have people who hate technique. Right, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Let's get some material and let's work on it and see what happens, you know. And that's what we did. And, you know, after that gig, the people who saw Simon Phillips just went, I want that guy. Whether it was Jeff Beck, whether it was Mick Jagger, everybody wanted Jack Bruce. They wanted to play with Simon. And Simon has gone on to be like a world famous drummer giving drum clinics, and it's still awesome. His technique is, and his timing, and wow, the fact that we got him when he was 18.
Yeah,
so I can spot talent.
You know, I think prior to that he was with Judas Priest. Like I heard he's with them. He was
with
like
everyone.
16 years old.
I mean, I did a gig in whole festival, which I helped organize, called Guitar Legends in Seville in 1991.
Oh, I saw some footage of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was able, I had a budget given to me of like $7 million. I'd rang up the most famous guitarists in the world, asked them if they wanted to do it, and most of them did do it. It's a jazz night, a blues night, a folk night, and then my night, a rock night, and my night was like people who weren't really guitarists, quite frankly, but I think for the networks they wanted names. So I had Bob Dylan, Joe Cocker, who else did I have? A Spanish guy, Jack Bruce, me, whatever. And so I had to choose a band, and I had Simon was the drummer, and so we played with Dylan, and I got Richard Thompson to come as well, and then me and Simon and everybody, we played with Joe Cocker, and then we played with all the different people. But yeah, the Miami Horns, we had the best musicians in the world. Ray Cooper on percussion. Yeah, you can see it, some of it on YouTube. And actually, funny enough, I posted a picture of me playing along the Watchtower with Dylan yesterday, saying happy 80th, Bob.
That's right, yeah, it was his birthday yesterday. That's right.
Such an experience. But Simon was the drummer there, because he was the best drummer, and Pino Palladino was on bass.
Yeah.
So a fine band. But Simon Phillips, whoa.
Yeah, interesting that Pino and him both went on to play with The Who, but at different times.
Yes.
But that's interesting. Always loved Pete Townshend's writing. He's probably my first inspiration on the guitar.
Oh, well, I forgot to mention him as well, because all that.
Oh, yeah. It's just like, don't think it over, just attack it. I appreciate that angle. I was wondering if you could tell us about a few songs, and then we'll wrap it up. I don't want to keep you too long. East of Asteroid. How did you come up with that one? What are your memories of writing that?
Well, actually, East of Asteroid is a classic example of when we were rehearsing for the 801. We combined two songs that were in this prog band I had with Bill McCormick.
Was this the Quiet Sun band, or?
Quiet Sun, yeah.
Yes, okay.
And one track was called East of Echo.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And the other one was called Daddy was Mummy was an asteroid. Daddy was a small non-stick kitchen utensil.
Yes, I love that.
So we combined.
It's almost a Canterbury title.
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. We were so into Soft Machine, Kevin Ayers and all that. So yeah, combined those two tracks, and we made one track out of it. And then we unleashed Simon Phillips on the double bass drums. And of course, there's some funny time signatures and things, which, and I have played it all over the world, actually. I played it a couple of years ago in Argentina with an Argentinian band who loved it, loved playing it. Most people love playing it. I put up a version of it on my YouTube channel at Ronnie Scott's.
I think I saw that. It's beautifully filmed, very clear, very close.
That's my son, yeah. With Charles Hayward, the original drummer from Quiet Sun, and then Leszek Moster, who is one of the best jazz pianists and Polish players. He played on, actually, we got to play on the Gilmour album, On an Island. And Jaron Stavik on bass, who actually I got to play on Rattle That Lock, Gilmour album.
Yeah.
And is on a lot of the tracks. Actually, he's on Caught by the Heart. Yeah. Funny enough.
Why didn't you do the tour where they went to Pompeii? Were you tied up doing something else?
By that stage, I think I'd run out of steam. By then, I think we'd been working together for about 10 years.
Okay. It was just time for a break.
It was time for a break. And actually, I was quite happy to get on with my own stuff. And some of the stuff I wrote then is coming out now on the Fin. So, you need space and time.
So I think my favorite Roxy tune is Out of the Blue. And
oh, great.
You had a hand in writing. Well, I was wondering your memories of writing that one and how you came up with the opening chord sequence.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange sort of thing. When you've got a guitar and you play the D chord.
Sure.
And you just start picking it, and then the other finger starts going all over the place, and you say, well, if I put my finger there, what kind of different chord would it make? And then suddenly that little progression came.
Yeah.
And once that progression came, everything else just, I thought, oh, that sounds like something that's some cellos. And luckily, Eddie Jobson was playing violin with us in Roxy.
Oh yeah, that was one of his amazing moments.
really do a good job there. And then thought at the end, you know what? Electric guitar, electric violin solo, like in Zappa, John Conte or something, And so all the influences came out. Yeah, let's have that. And Eddie did a brilliant job. And in fact, we played that when we got inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall.
I was going to ask about that. I saw some footage, and it was really stunning.
We played that with Eddie, yeah.
Was that the first time you all had seen Eddie in a number of years?
Yeah, many, many years. Yeah, probably since 1976.
Wow.
Because he went off and joined Zappa's band, and then he did the stuff with John Wetton and all those things that he's done since then. And then he was living in LA, and it's not like you bump into someone in a coffee shop if they're
no. Well, he's still got it.
It's incredible. He was like a wonder kid.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did you guys find him, and what did you think the first time you heard him?
He was a friend of Brian's. I think Brian's sister knew someone, and he could have been the son of them or whatever.
Yeah.
But he had been in Curved F, briefly. And when Eno left, he couldn't find anybody to be like Eno.
Right.
And so Brian said, well, what about this guy? I mean, it's a totally different thing to Eno, but he is basically an incredible technical musician. So all the piano parts were like suddenly incredible.
All right.
And then he had the violin chops as well. So he's very, very useful, and he's very good at handling all equipment and stuff like that. So
yeah, he was very cutting edge when it came to those synths.
And
such.
And the Mellotron.
Always does great stuff. Diamond Head, Frontera.
Yeah.
Tell me how that piece came together, and what are the lyrics about? What inspired the lyrics? And did you write them, or did Robert write them?
Because I'd met Rob when I was 16 or 17 as well. And so him and David Gilmour were like I knew some famous people in famous bands, the coolest bands in London, like Pink Floyd and Soft Machine. And so when I got a chance to do a solo album, I thought, right, I get friends and I'll ask Robert. And I said, Robert, you can, you know a bit of Spanish, don't you? So, and I'd like to have something, that sort of signifies some of my Latin roots in Spanish.
Sure.
He said, you're fine. I said, okay, well, here's the tune. And he said, fine, I'll come to the studio. And then, so he sang that. And I speak Spanish fluently. So I said, I don't quite understand. He said, no, I just opened a dictionary. And chose a whole bunch of phrases, which is a very Dada sort of avant-garde sort of Robert type of thing to do.
Sure, right.
And sang them for years. People in Spain and South America said, what is that about? It's like a really strange story about getting to the frontier and then being stopped by the customs people. It becomes quite an intriguing sort of surreal story. But it really is the tone of his voice and everything that I wanted, which I always loved.
Oh, yeah, I love his vocals.
Yeah.
They have kind of almost a childlike quality to them that's very endearing.
Very, very, yeah.
Did you know that there is a chain of Mexican restaurants in America called Frontera?
No.
It's true.
Well, I'm sure I mean, obviously.
Yeah,
they didn't nick it from my song.
No, but it's just but I think of your song when I go there occasionally. Your song is much better than their food.
Yeah, okay.
Much more tasty.
Great.
Quick one. Could you share a John Wetton story with us? Anything come to mind? Any favorites?
John, we were such good friends. It was holiday together, spend a lot of time with him. I saw him before he joined King Crimson. He was in a family briefly. And one of the unique things in London was that he could do the slap bass, which, the guy from Sly and the Family Stone.
Larry Creme.
Larry Creme. He could do that. And he was like the only person in England who could do that. But the thing about John Wetton was that he was so in tune. He could play and sing perfectly in tune, regardless of like the awful noise that was going on and the discordant sounds that were around him. John was such a strong singer and player, and you know, to play, sing a melody and play maybe a complicated bass, which he did in Crimson at the same time, and it's really great musicianship as well. John was just a wonderful person. You know, he was always searching for many years to have commercial success, which he did with Asia.
Well, quite, yeah.
So that was great. But then, you know, things just got out of control, I think, for him in his world, and he was drinking a lot.
I know he went through some tough times, but it was nice to see him bounce back.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, absolutely. Towards the end, unfortunately passed away. But, you know, I have such wonderful memories. It was, you know, sometimes I think, I just wish he was around. We had such a laugh together. Wonderful man and a brilliant, brilliant musician.
Oh, yeah. And
we did an album together. Who can forget?
Oh, of course.
The Wetton Manzanera.
Is that the one that has the Steely Dan cover on it? Do It Again. Was that you guys?
Well, we did that just for a TV show.
Just for a TV show.
We had to do something, but no, I don't think it's on that. But yeah, we had our moment when we thought, oh, this is going to.
And he guested on most of your solo albums, right? Kate Scope, he's on there, and
yeah, he's on. Yeah, because we were such good friends. Yeah, I always wanted to include. You know, the solo album's just an excuse to have friends.
Is Miss Shapiro on Diamond Head?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a favorite. Yeah, really like that
one. And 801 Live, of course. Yeah.
Such a cool one. Well, let's circle back around to the work you're doing with Tim. And I'm wondering, how did you meet Tim? Because I noticed he guested on K-Scope back in the 70s. So you've known him for decades.
I've known him since 1975. The first Roxy Music tour of Australia was in 1975. And so I arrived at the hotel in Sydney. It's a very long journey, 22 hours or something by plane, and put on the TV. And who's on the TV? Split Ends with Tim is the main singer. And I just couldn't believe it. I wasn't expecting that kind of music. And then the next day at the gig, they were the support act. So then I watched them. I thought, well, you're great. If you know, I just popped my head in and said, if anything I can do to help, I knew there were new bands starting, let me know. And I walked on, and a little head popped down. Will you produce our album? Wow, hey, it's a bit difficult. You're here in Australia. I mean, anyway, they did do their first album in Sydney, but then for some strange reason, they decided to come and re-record the whole thing with me in London. And so I've known him since 1975.
Okay.
And him and Neil was only 15 then. He was too young to be in the band, but he eventually came to London. And when he, I think he'd been playing acoustic guitar a lot, wasn't used to playing electric. So they said, Phil, will you just give me a few pointers to how to, you know, handle, you know, the amps and things like that. He came over to the house, and, you know, this is when he was 16 or something. And then to watch their trajectory has been just a delight.
Oh yeah, well, just
the ups and downs of them, and I was in LA when they were mixing Woodface, the Crowded House.
Yeah, such a brilliant record.
Great record with Bob Clearmountain, who did Avalon and our late albums, and they were doing a thing for MTV, and I can't find it on YouTube, but they said, do you want to come along and watch? I came along to a tiny club, and then they said, come on stage. So there was no one there really, apart from me. And they suddenly broke into Love is the Drug, Roxy track, without me knowing, you know. And they were just such great fun, you know.
Oh,
and actually, funny enough, when I reconnected with Neil at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame gig, because Stevie Nicks was being inducted. The whole Fleetwood Mac were there on a table.
And he was in Fleetwood Mac recently.
Yeah. So he said, come to the party afterwards. We had a picture taken. I sent it to Tim, said, look who I found in New York. And from then onwards, Tim said, "Oh, by the way, do you want to play on some tracks that I'm doing with the other guys from Split Ends?" Which I did. Hasn't come out yet. It's now called Forensics. And then a year later, Tim, sent me the email. "We got new tracks," and here we are, a year later, and we're bringing stuff out. First of 2 albums. Yeah.
Yeah. So when do you think we can get our hands on the album, the first one, and where will we get it at when the time comes?
Well, we're only going to do a limited number of CDs, but it'll be available digitally on Spotify and YouTube and Apple on the 26th of August. The album. On the 18th of June, the first 4 tracks will be available.
And do you have a name for the EP? Or you said you're going to name it after the lead single, right?
It's going to be, it's just Tim Finn and Phil Manzanera, Caught by the Heart.
Caught by the Heart, okay.
Both the EP and the album. And it's on our own label, and, it's all hecho en casa, as they say, made at home.
Yeah, there you go. Well, thank you so much for your time, Phil. I mean,
pleasure.
It's a treat. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap it up?
No, I think I've exhausted everybody.
All the options. I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'd love to have you on again when everything's out, maybe in 2 months or whatever, and talk more about the specifics of that album once it's done.
Well, actually, if anyone wants to know more about it, we have a website already.
Okay.
It's finnmanz.com, FINNMANZ.com.
Okay, excellent.
It's all up there, and you can see the single there as well, and everything, the video, and hey.
So, one last question. What's your favorite Roxy album cover?
Ooh, cover. I think the first one, actually.
Yeah.
The first one was so iconic, I think they did a great job. The people working at Brian Ferry, his art director, who was a guy at university, they both studied fine art with the famous British pop artist Anthony Price did the clothes. Carl Stoker did the photography, a famous fashion photographer, and the model was actually married to Chris Jagger, Jagger's brother.
Yeah.
Carrie Ann. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I think they achieved wonderfully. When I saw it, I said, wow.
Yeah. It definitely set a standard that you guys followed up on.
Yeah.
That, Phil, thank you so much. Take care.
Pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. Take care.